I'm not a flopper. I'm not a flop. I'm not a flop. I'm not. I'm not a flop, not a flop, not a prop, not a blop, not a crop, not a drop. I'm not a drop. I'm not a dropout. No doubt. No doubt about that. Stop. Stop. Stop prop. Stop the flop. Stop blop. Thank top. Flip flop. Flop hop. Hop the flop. I'm top. I'm top, I'm not drop. Not a drop. Not a dropout. I'm not drought. Neither loud. Is this allowed? I'm not proud. Stop. Stop. Stop the pop. Top the flop. Top the pop. Top flop. Top job. Pop, pop, pop. Dump, dump. Pump, pump. Clump, pump. I'm not dump. I'm not. Not a flop. I'm not a flop. I'm not flop. I'm not a flopper. I'm not a flopper. I said it. I'm not a flop. You know, I know about flops. You know, I've had my fair share of them. You know, I'm even kind of an expert when it comes down to it. You know, I have to admit it. You know, I traffic in lousy films. You know, Shim Sham Shimmy or The Shrimp on the Barbie or Blood Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. No. Time fillers, you know, but you know what? That doesn't make me a failure. You know, if success, as Joe Scanlon puts it, is based more on circulation than in recognition, then you know I've certainly made it. You know, you know, you all know me. You know, you've all seen my movies, most probably on TV, and you might as well miss my credits, you know, because, you know, sometimes I think that maybe there's too many people credited within the credits, or maybe there's, maybe they don't give enough time to credits, or. But my name is not important. My name is Allen Smithee. It's a made-up name, but it's also it's also my real name, and you know, Allen Smithee. If you're a little bit clever and you rearrange the letters, you can spell out the alias man. What is it to be an alias? I'm going to tell you. Good afternoon, good night. Before I begin, I would like to thank José Roca and everyone here at the ARTBO fair and the forum here for making my appearance here possible today. Thank you. You know, when Mario García Torres first initially talked to me, I must admit that I was a little bit skeptical about this whole show here. You know, first of all, I'm not even sure how many of my films Mario has actually seen. You know, but he didn't really ask me about that. You know, and you know, even though that's usually what they ask me for. You know, to talk about my films. You know, when they're interested, and that's what people want to know. And but in fact, Mario's instructions were pretty vague. You know, after giving it some thoughts, you know, I now think that, you know, maybe it was some kind of ploy to set up some kind of situation and see what happens, or you know, maybe he wanted to create a situation and see what happens. But you know, while we discussed this conversation, I must admit Mario had a few points which he convinced me about, but most of the time we completely disagree. So let me just tell you that this is going to be my personal take on it. I'm not here as a frontman for Mr. García Torres. I should start by introducing myself. As I mentioned before, I'm a filmmaker. I make films. I'm known as Allen Smithee, sometimes also Allen Smithee, sometimes Adam with an A-D-A-M. Smithee is S-M-I-T-H-E-E. But my name is not important. I mean, it is important in only insofar as it gathers a number of works. And sometimes I think I might not actually be a guy. Maybe I'm a woman or maybe I'm a collectivity. Maybe I'm a Walter. Maybe I'm a Walter Plinch. Or maybe I'm a Georgina. Georgina Spelving. Or David Agnew. Or Prokopolis. Paul Prokopolis, the pianist. Oh, he's an amazing story. But anyway, I shouldn't get sidetracked here so early. Smith is a pseudonym, just to make clear. Sometimes I like to say it, clear, black and white here. I am the name that film directors use whenever they want to withdraw their name from a film they've made, and for whatever reason, shame comes up a lot. If you're a film director and you got hired to make a film, and sometime in the process you start thinking the film is not yours anymore. It doesn't represent you anymore. Maybe they the industry who commissioned it to you, they took it off you. Maybe they cut it in some weird way. You don't recognize it anymore. You want to make a case. You go to the Directors Guild of America, and you make a case there. And if it's approved, they take out your name and they put mine in its place. Allen Smithee. Allen Smithee has made 77 films until today, which I think it's complex and remarkable, for a number of reasons, But anyway, I mean, I'm more interested here to think about the whole phenomenon, the production as a creative act, this phenomenon as a creative act, a spontaneous, surefire creative act. Is it possible that the awareness of dishonor can become a creative act? Is it possible that the awareness of dishonor can become a creative act? I think it can, because I'm the product of it. Not my films, me. Their shame produces Smithee. But I'm an idea, okay? I'm just an idea, I'm the data phase of the corporation, I'm their most avant-garde creation to date, I think it's strange, but it's a revealing fact that sometimes the movie industry could be more avant-garde than the avant-garde. I'm an idea that was invented by a group of intellectuals, property intellectuals. I'll call them lawyers. But then I'm developed by a way more group of heterogeneous group of artists and pranksters. It has to do with the idea of the auteur on cinema. It has to do with the idea of the auteur on cinema, and and in my case, I have my own arguments about this, but I'll get to them in a moment. I've been around since 1969. Yes, I need to define myself. Before I get carried away, I'm a text. I'm a script. I'm not a person. And essentially, I'm a story written by the mistaken outcome of life. Mistaken outcome of life, and I know this is an artist talk, and I should probably talk about that. Well, in truth, I don't get that many invitations like this because most of the time, when they invite me, they know that the guy who's going to show up is actually not going to be me. By this time, I'm being played by some kind of performer. His name is Mario García Torres. He works in Mexico City as an artist, or that's mostly what he's known for, and what I mean about that is that in a way this is what he does. He sometimes metaphorically and sometimes literally he stands in. He in order to tell stories, and I'm sure when he read this text, he thought maybe actually indeed I can become Allen Smithee, and apart from the accent and the age thing, and maybe the way he's dressed, I think he's doing all right, But you know what? Actually, there was this one guy. Who had the idea of impersonating me. Not an artist, but somebody in the industry. In the movie industry. Somebody who he wanted to be a director, and he thought, I'll jump in this guy's bandwagon. Of course, it's a good way to get ahead. Considering everything that I've done, or done for others, really, to pretend, to be me, for instance, a self-ready-made man, and okay, sorry. Anyway, I should stop talking about my persona. Okay, I wasn't invited here to talk about that, but how can I say it? I think this is probably the only chance that I'm going to have to defend what I've done, in the last few decades, as a productive effort. I want to make success out of this enchantment. And look. I'm not perfect, okay, and my arguments might have holes, and it may be unsound, but I think at least I'm honest. This is what I am, and this is or this is what I've become. Bear with me for a second, okay? I'll try to make some sense. See, I think that there's tons of anecdotes that I'm sure you're gonna find interesting to listen to. I mean, about my career, you know. Did you know, for example, that the first ever mention of my film, of my name, was not at the Directors Guild of America, but it was in a film, you know, a film from by Orson Welles, a classic film by Orson Welles from 1955. It's called Mr. Arcading, and then later in the U.S. it was known as Confidential Report, and you know, through the title character, I'm linked to the enigma of origins and the failure of memory and an amazing, great criminal conspiracy. You know, in the film when Orson Welles, you know, the character that he plays, the mysterious tycoon, feigns amnesia. You know, this other character, his counterpart, whether ask himself whether this guy is not Mr. Arcading, but somebody else named Smithee. And, you know, Mr. Arcading is also the title of a novel, you know, supposedly written by Orson Welles. But, you know, it happens that he didn't actually write a word of it. You know, and the movie's a mess because the studio cut it without the director's input, and so no, you know, at the end what you have is just, you know, a mutilated film and a ghost written book and the story of a fake amnesiac, and you know, in other words, you know, a real Allen Smithee film, you know, and you know, a good case could be made that, you know, Smithee and Welles belong together. You know, I think they're, you know, natural bedfellows. You know, I mean, you know, take the last performance of Welles. You know, and you know, as the voice of the evil planet robot in the Transformer, the movie. You know, not the recent Michael Bay monstrosity, but the original one, the black and white. You know, that certainly should have been a Smithee. You know, but anyway, maybe I keep this for a second lecture if they invite me. I don't want this to. You know. Thing is, you know, everybody expects mediocrity from me, and you know, I hate to disappoint. You know, it's almost as bad as saying no. You know, I mean, mediocrity knows nothing better than itself. You know, what else can you ask for when you, you know, when you trust yourself, when you made your best effort. You know. You know, even if others think that it's not enough. I mean, would talent make you a better person? I mean, more than one here of you guys will agree with me. You know, if you manage to finish a film, you know, it's a great personal success. You know, regardless of public perception. You know, but. I don't know. Maybe I should have prepared mediocrity for this presentation. You know, it slipped my mind. I mean, I do have a few things to say about it. But it wasn't always like that. Okay, let me get there. You know, I think that, or I think that more and more, I think that. Those things that at some point were perceived as bad, I think they aren't. Honestly, you know, I mean, look at the first film I made. Okay, as I said, my first film was made in 1969. It was very, very serious back then. You know, it was a cowboy story. It was, you know, and it got good critical notices. You know. Let me read you this. Sharply directed by Allen Smithee, who has an adroit facility for scanning faces and extracting sharp background detail. You know, and you know, that's the New York Times. You know, and you know, of course, I like to read this all the time. You know, because you know, Smith's direction keeps the action taut, and he draws convincing portrayals from the supporting cast. You know, maybe this is not even really a compliment, but you know, but it's variety. You know, and you know, I like to read this stuff. You know, you know, at the end, this is, you know, they are a refutable proof of my existence. And I mean, and this is just the beginning. You know, my bibliography is actually not that bad. There's actually quite a decent book about my work. It's published by the University of Minnesota Press. You know, it's, I mean, you know, not that I agree with everything that they say there, you know, but you know, I mean, first in the book, I mean, the book is a collection of essays by a number of intellectuals, and first they define my films as throwaways, which, you know, I can cope with that. But then they start saying that that the whole history of film can be studied through my films, which, you know, to be honest, I find that little academic, you know. See, a couple of decades later, I made some films that came before. I mean, it was already the 1980s by the time that I realized that I had made some films before 1969. You know, 1969, the year where I was born. And, you know, some might say, you know, Allen, this production is out of sync. And you know, it's out of sync with the production of the time. And, you know, how should I say this? You know, one day I realized that, you know, I had made some earlier films. Well, you know, if you follow me, you know, you must realize this too. You know, that's how it works. You know, that's how it works for me. You know, actually, once they withdrew a film from my filmography, you know, for a number of years, and then years later they put it back, which, you know, it felt strange, but, you know, I guess, you know, you get used to it, you know. You know, lately, I mean, one of the, you know, lately I've made a promotional film for housing development, you know, something I've never done before, you know. It's a short story. It's set in London, you know, and the, you know, that has these two have become now my earlier films, and you know, they're from 1965 and 55 retrospectively, and you know, they are as most of them, you know, they're, you know, forgettable. Well, one very dear to me, though, you know, it's a film released in 1968. It's a love story between an actor, an extra, and an editor who's working on a film. And you know, some people have said that, you know, this has to do with you know, cinema, talking about cinema, but. You know, actually, I'm not in the business of doing cinema about cinema. You know, I'm in the business of making sure that every film has a director. You know, actually talking about cinema, this year I got a new film attributed to me. You know, it's you know, I'm very curious about it. It's they say it's a film in which, you know, everybody in the business industry, you know, in the film industry, you know, they're interviewed. You know, there's writers, producers, and everything, and it tells you how to sell your film. And it's a kind of documentary where everybody is interviewed there, and it's titled $1 Billion Weekend, and it's in post-production right now. I can't wait to see it. In the last few years, I've also started to make my first trips to the valley, to the porn industry. Of course, those guys are wise. They realize I have a great background. And it's not a joke. I started to make some porn films now, and but honestly, I really think that there's something much more interesting to do for a pseudonym than doing porn films, and I talk in a close way. Look at poor Georgina Spelving. She had quite a beautiful career in the sneaker business of becoming a nobody, and she played it beautifully, and and then comes the porn industry and destroys everything. Georgina was the alias that an actor who didn't want to his real name to be known, or that play is such a small part in a theater piece, for example, that it was an embarrassment to put the name. They will take out their name and put that one of Georgina, and but then in 1973, she became a famous actress, a famous porn actress, and she epitomized the era of the porn chick. But she was almost she was almost imperceptible, in the theater scene, and she played really a very discreet role, and a fundamental role, really, and she was never really there, but everybody loved her, like producers and actors and crew guys, everybody loved her, and but then there comes the porn, and but this is one of the reasons why I accepted to come here, because I want to defend my work. I don't want this is this a little bit if this is a little bit misleading, let me tell you that it's also confusing for me as well. Okay, but then again, I might be able to come to good ground and try to make some sense, or at least to make a narration that makes sense, in the most conventional sense, in the end, my life is like a film. It's where time is experienced linearly. But actually, it's practiced sporadically, and it's fed from multiple currents. And what is time anyway, right? It's just a fundamental intellectual structure. It's not as if events happened one after the other just like that. No, time is an invention. It's an arbitrary, indefinitive, continued progress of existence, and which sometimes it gets crumpled and reversed and played around, and crushed sometimes, like in films, sometimes strange things happen to the stories that I tell. And, actually, there was this story by Wittgenstein, the Wittgenstein tell. It's really interesting. It's about a guy who wakes up in the morning and then leaves the house and goes to the newspaper stand and buys a newspaper and goes back home, starts to read the paper, and then he leaves the house, go back again to the newsstand, get a new copy of the same newspaper, go back home, and then comes out again from the house, go back to the newsstand, buys the paper, go back home, and then he does the same, go back in, go back, and returns to the house. Why? Just to check that nothing has happened in the meantime, and I think I don't know. Maybe Wittgenstein tells the story better, and I think he had something else better to say. But I just like it. See, I've learned to be very tolerant with time. Okay, I mean, sometimes my film are just that time. They're there to have time pass. To create a consistency of progress. Mostly through the night, to be honest, and. Maybe one day I will retitle all my films with their length stat. A lot of the times it doesn't really matter what are they about, as long as they fill in a specific time span. My longest film today is 181 minutes. For example, I was only aware of this cowboy film more than 10 years after the fact. I mean, I was supposedly born in 1969, but today my earliest film is from 1955. Which 1955, I think it's. I mean, to me is really interesting because, that's the year that the Orson film came out, and. To me, I mean, this is really a key moment in my career. If I may say so. This is when the present and past coincide. One day, I wish somebody will write an unauthorized biography. Here, Am I becoming too much of a Smithee here? Sometimes, sorry, sometimes with the microphone and this thing and the structure here, suddenly time starts to you have a different perception of time up here, Oh yeah, more and more, I think that this time hopping, might be surprising, but it's okay. I've learned to live with it. Actually, I think it's great. This is how my filmography is built. As I was just explaining. I mean, why do we expect artists to create chronologically all the time? Wouldn't it be great if artists create works for different years all the time? For me, if you want to picture it that way, my body of work is like an automatic sculpture, where nobody knows where it's going to jut out next, not even me. And I mean, isn't that a possible a future of invention? I mean, this is. I think this is much more interesting than trying to create a logical progress. Honestly, trying to make sense of life as if life was just a steady and monotonous onward movement. Trying to make sense all the time. And what was his name? Costa, Eduardo Costa. You know, I just bump into this work back there. It's just that there. It's an amazing work about really interesting, a very, very, very sharp piece of work about the timing of works by different artists. You know, it's a simple sign like this size, and the title is actually written on the card there. And it says something like this: a piece that is essentially the same as a piece made by any of the first conceptual artists, dated 2 years earlier than the original and signed by somebody else. A piece that is essentially the same as a piece made by any of the first conceptual artists, dated 2 years earlier than the original and signed by somebody else. The piece is from 1970. And you know, I think that what Costa proposes is a reappraisal, but you know, not of the artists like, you know, like they do in these art fairs, but of specific works under different names. You know, he doesn't want to change the works, or he just wants to change the authorship. And please note the date of creation, and. You know, he wants to make to effect a redistribution of the historical record. You know, an anachronism, and you know, it really got me thinking when I saw it yesterday. You know, if you ask me, you know, I really feel identified with it. You know, I mean. Isn't the meaning of two identical works signed by two different artists, aren't they totally different? I mean, you know, my works, you know, they exist, and then at some point they stop existing when the other directors discredit them, and then later they exist again because they're attributed to me. You know, they're the same work, you know, they're the same film, but they can be read under a whole different framework, you know. See, I'm a filmmaker, you know, but I don't make films, you know, that they are slowly incorporated into my body of work. You know, I don't do films, you know, I do filmography. I mean, there are plenty of films out there, you know. I mean, why would I wish to add more? You know, sometimes or you know, most of the time I feel like, you know, actually the content of my films is not relevant, you know. What is relevant is that I made them. You know, or you know, the fact that they are now mine, you know, they belong to my filmography. And you know, they're legitimate because of me, and I exist because of them. You know, but maybe I'm just a dustbin of creative work, you know, or an unlikely collection of artistic rubbish, or cobbled together leftovers, you know, but you know, at the same time, you can really make it as a garbage collector today. You know, personally, I never met a piece of film that I didn't like. You know, or you know, maybe I'm just like a foster home of shelter of unclaimed projects or orphan projects, you know, a non-author of as the organizing principle for a disjoint body of work, honestly. And of course, like I said, you know, I don't exist, and that's okay. You know, I'm you know, but then again, here I am. You know, my films are the proof of it. And I mean, I was told the art world is really invested in words, and I'm words. I'm reading words. I'm just reading words, and maybe that's why whoever wrote this script thought that maybe it was good to have it presented by a performer, in this context, or to have it presented trying to become Smithee, and. Actually, you might want to know that this presentation, this text was delivered about 8 years ago in London in a pretty similar situation, and it was not long ago that the artists started to experiment and see if the issues discussed here could reach a different moment, So actually, each time that they present this text, he edits the script a little bit and slightly, and deliberately proposes it to have it delivered in a different context, inside a different framework, provided by the organizers. In this case, like among other lectures, like here in the FORO. Maybe he thought, the artist, he thought that Smithee, the character, can actually become, just a form, an excuse, and I'm what can I say? I'm an excuse, I'm an exempt. I'm a free form. But anyway, I should stop talking like that. Maybe. But I don't want to get you bored with technicalities here. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to try to get off the script to buy time here. Please forget what I just said. Okay, this is my opinions do not necessarily represent those of the presenters anyway. By the way, this edition of the work is actually in the collection of Bilge and Aro Kambushen in Istanbul. If any, I won't make this much more longer. Okay. It's just that this kind of invitations, but this, same time, this kind of invitation make me exist, even if, for 35, 40 minutes, or, sometimes what can I say? I try to prolong it, what is existence anyway? When they invited me here, I started to do a little research, and I discovered the work of Christopher Di Arcangelo, a really interesting artist from the U.S. You know that one? It's really interesting. I was reading that in a show in 1979. He withdrew his name from the show. So in all the materials about the show, invitation, press release, all that stuff, his name only appears as a blank. And sometimes I think, I think I could be. Maybe I think it could be just that, sometimes when I think about the real motivations of the people who invented Smithee, I think that they were imagining in a way more devious than plan, devious plot than just cashing in the author theory. I think. What were those guys thinking when they invented Smithee? During actually the rehearsals of this presentation, I came to actually a funny conclusion, and I think that they were not talking about Smithee, or I think that they were talking about a way more powerful entity. they were not thinking about an artist like the writers of this script seem to think, but I think they were thinking about it, a very powerful entity, a powerful but ghostly entity. And I think they were thinking about Adam Smith. Adam Smith, the economist, philosopher from the 19th century. I mean, of course, you all know that. It's Smithee. It is the guy who invented this rose-tinted explanation of capitalism, and which is meant to illustrate how those who seek wealth by following their individual self-interests are seize society as a whole and build a common good. Not that I believe in that, but honestly, I think that's how they saw Smithee, as a powerful unseen force, that could turn an aborted film into a decent product. That could make it marketable. Smithee actually has an invisible hand. And what can I say? Maybe this is midlife paranoia, but I think that's precisely what happened. To be honest, it's. Smithee has an invisible eye that can turn unforeseen actions into a creative order. Not for the good of the market, because that never really happened, but as a new paradigm for film production. Maybe this might sound a little bit extravagant, but I think that's precisely what happened. How those. I think that is really interesting. How those economic theories can become a creative force. Behind avant-garde creations. Look at me. I'm repeating myself again. Okay. Sometimes when I start to believe in my own self-ready-madeness, I can become a little bit egocentric. In the end, I'm just an artist. An artist that happens to be, because of an innumerable number of reasons. And at the same time, let's be honest, okay. I'm a self-ready-made artist, not just because my name is on loan to other artists, but because the works that I made, they have already been made. And this might sound trivial, but it's not. Again, I don't do works; they get done, and then they're attributed to me. And at some point, and most of them are, unsuccessful in the most banal sense of the term. But I think it's interesting nonetheless. I'm not an artist who goes around, like going buying and picking objects and turning them into his or her art. I'm a verbatim illustration of an autonomous process. It's a larger mechanism that feeds me, that feeds my process, and I don't have any other option but to be who I am, a self-ready-made artist, and what I like about that is that my films stop being films and they become a documentary, they become a film that actually creates an artistic practice, or a bibliography that documents an artist's thought. You don't have to believe everything that I just said. Maybe sometimes I just spend too much time with myself. These days, I don't get too much work these days, and and I ended up spending a lot of time, thinking why, how I am a non-productive productive effort. Are you able to make any sense of this, what I'm saying? No. In case you think that this whole, self-ready-made artist thing, it's unsustainable. At least you can believe that, I'm invisible. I'm invisible. That's at least this is one of my most appreciated achievements. A creative force that is unseen, and I can cope with that. An unseen creative force. In the worst case scenario. Concretely, I'm here to ask you to consider whether all those works that I've made, that I sign by all these people who don't want to sign them, I want to ask you to think of them and give me the honor to think that they can exist as somebody else's work. Even if they're viewed as a string of failures. I'm here to convince you to look at a certain long list of these own films as someone creative practice. And like I said before, I don't exist, and I'm happy about that. I'm not supposed to matter. I'm happy to be the moniker of some sort of spontaneous order. To tell you the truth, that's one of the few ideas that I come up with that I kind of bring interesting conclusions to me, or that I was able to come up with. Lately I spend a lot of time reading this kind of scientific stuff. There's this interesting text that it talks about spontaneous order. It's really interesting. Spontaneous order is also a social theory that describes the emergence of various kinds of order created from the combined acts of self-interest individuals, who are not intentionally trying to create order. And I think that's precisely where I am, or what my practice has become. Even if my filmography grows in a chaotic way, it is perceived as an organized production. It's the others' disinterest that creates Smithee. It's the others' filmmakers' shame that creates Smithee. The truth is that there's a danger of me disappearing, really, and lately, at some point I was some kind of secret, and after some decades I actually became something really interesting, and people wrote about me, but lately, I've been less and less films are attributed to me, to be honest, and. I fear, I fear that I'm just going to die, and I don't know, to be forgotten, after everything that I've done, maybe the artwork can give me a last chance, honestly. I have a hard time saying no. and that's precisely why I accepted to take this invitation anyway. After some long, almost abstract discussions with myself, it occurred to me that actually they wanted me to come here and talk about failure. Of course I know something about that, but first-hand knowledge. But sadly, it's really beyond my expertise to try to come up with an argument or a lecture about failure. I know something about that, but yeah, the only thing I will say about it is that it's impossible to conceive the last 2 centuries without failure, right? Where would we be without breakdown, collapse and disjunction? It's been a smashing success, hasn't it? Better a productive failure than a non-productive success. And that's my motto, and it's there to be taken too. An unproductive success happens when everything goes right, but nobody knows why. Whereas an unproductive failure, it leads to insights and revelations, and thus further, helps the betterment of the world and of humanity, Anyway, this is probably as close as I'm gonna ever get to doing a proper lecture. Anyway, at the end, I'm just an accidental artist, and an artist that happens to be for. I wish that from this perspective, my work gets reappreciated. I wish that from this perspective, the body of work that I've been developing for the last few decades stop being overlooked. Honestly, even if I don't exist, even if my work is at first seems at some point just a chaotic thing, maybe it feels a little inconsistent, but. No, maybe I should just leave it there anyway. I hope I wasn't too egocentric. As it happens, I sometimes I cannot separate my persona from my work, and it's quite difficult, honestly, and anyway, my work probably could only be understood from the perspective of my bumpy journey, through this world. And anyway, I'm not so much of a speaker or an actor anyway. I should stop talking. At this time, I might be just lip syncing my own words, or maybe I'm just, shooting from the hip anyway. Thank you.